London, 1888, the heart of the Victorian era, a city of stark contrasts, where opulence and poverty collided. Gaslight illuminated grand avenues yet cast long, sinister shadows in the East End. Here, amidst the squalor and despair, a nightmare was about to unfold. The fog, a constant companion, swirled through the streets, amplifying the city's secrets. It clung to the cobblestones, seeped into homes, and shrouded everything in an eerie silence. Under this cloak of darkness and fog, a monster stalked the streets. He was a phantom, a whisper in the night, leaving behind a trail of blood and terror. Known as Jack the Ripper, his reign of terror left an indelible scar on the city's psyche. The Whitechapel murders shook Victorian society to its core, exposing the dark underbelly of life in the East End. The first whispers of fear began in the waning days of summer, August 1888. Newspapers reported a gruesome discovery in Whitechapel. Polly Nichols, a woman known to walk the streets, was found lifeless, her throat slashed, her body mutilated. Life in the East End was cheap, especially for women on the margins of society. Yet the brutality inflicted upon Polly Nichols hinted at a darkness beyond the usual violence. Panic set in as the body count began to rise. Annie Chapman, found murdered, bore the same horrific wounds. The killer sought to defile, to desecrate, leaving his victims as grotesque warnings. Women barricaded themselves indoors, terrified to venture out alone. The police, under immense pressure, increased their patrols, but Jack the Ripper remained elusive. Who were the unfortunate souls who crossed paths with Jack the Ripper? They were mothers, daughters, sisters, women struggling to survive in Whitechapel. Marianne Nichols, known as Polly, was last seen alive on the night of August 31st, 1888. Annie Chapman, a mother of three, turned to prostitution to support herself and her children. Her life ended brutally on the night of September 8, 1888. Elizabeth Stride, a Swedish immigrant, was found murdered on the night of September 30th, 1888. Catherine Eddowes, found murdered just hours after Elizabeth Stride, became the Ripper's fourth victim. Her body, discovered in Mitre Square, bore the full brunt of the killer's rage. Historians and criminologists have identified 5 murders that bear the unmistakable signature of the killer. These 5 women, now known as the Canonical Five, are Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. Each murder was a single movement in a larger, more sinister symphony of death. The first 2 murders established the pattern: women killed by a slash to the throat, their bodies mutilated post-mortem. The third murder, that of Elizabeth Stride, deviated slightly from the pattern. The murder of Catherine Eddowes returned to the full horror of the previous killings. The fifth and final murder, that of Mary Jane Kelly, was the most brutal of all. Kelly was murdered indoors, allowing the killer time to indulge his darkest fantasies. The murders attributed to Jack the Ripper were not simply acts of violence, they were rituals, carefully orchestrated performances of death. The throat slashing was a precise, almost surgical incision, severing the carotid artery. The killer possessed a chilling knowledge of human anatomy. The mutilations were deliberate and symbolic. The removal of organs, the slashing of the abdomen, the facial mutilations, all pointed towards a deeper, more sinister motivation. Some criminologists theorize that the Ripper had anatomical knowledge, perhaps gained through medical training or experience as a butcher. Others speculate that the mutilations were driven by a deeper psychological disturbance. Whatever the motivation, the Ripper's modus operandi spoke volumes about his character. As the body count rose, the pressure mounted on Scotland Yard to find the killer. The police found themselves outmatched by a cunning and elusive adversary. The fog-choked streets and overcrowded slums shielded the killer from view. The nature of the victims, women living on the margins of society, made the investigation more challenging. Despite these challenges, Scotland Yard deployed a significant number of officers to the East End. However, despite their best efforts, Jack the Ripper remained elusive, vanishing into the fog and shadows. The mystery surrounding Jack the Ripper has spawned countless theories and speculation. One of the most intriguing suspects is Montague John Druitt, a barrister who committed suicide shortly after the last of the canonical murders. Another compelling suspect is Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant who lived in Whitechapel at the time of the murders. Kosminski, who suffered from severe mental illness, harbored a deep-seated hatred of women. The list of suspects goes on, including artists, doctors, butchers, and even members of the royal family. Each suspect reveals tantalizing clues that hint at a possible connection to the crimes, yet never quite providing definitive proof. As the Ripper's reign of terror gripped Whitechapel, hundreds of letters, purportedly written by Jack the Ripper, flooded newspapers and police stations. These letters ranged from the rambling and incoherent to the chillingly detailed. Some contained threats of future violence, while others taunted the police for their inability to catch the killer. One letter, dubbed Dear Boss, gained particular notoriety. Another letter, known as the From Hell letter, arrived at the home of George Lusk, chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. While most of the letters were dismissed as hoaxes, a few have continued to fascinate investigators. The letter's authenticity remains a subject of debate. More than a century after the Whitechapel murders, Jack the Ripper remains an enigma. The passage of time has only served to deepen the mystery. The murders were theatrical productions, meticulously staged to shock and horrify. The Ripper's ability to vanish into thin air added to his mystique. The fact that the Ripper was never caught only adds to his enduring appeal. The case, forever unresolved, allows us to project our own fears and fantasies onto the blank canvas of the Ripper's identity. The shadow of Jack the Ripper continues to loom large over Whitechapel. The streets where the Ripper's victims once walked are now bustling thoroughfares. The memory of the Ripper lingers, kept alive by countless books, films, and television shows. The Whitechapel murders have become a macabre tourist attraction. The case has had a profound impact on criminal profiling, forensic science, and the public's fascination with serial killers. The Whitechapel murders also exposed the deep social inequalities that existed in Victorian London. The Ripper's legacy is a complex and contradictory one, a mix of fear and fascination, of horror and historical significance. The fog that once shrouded Victorian London has long since lifted, yet the mystery of Jack the Ripper remains. Despite over a century of investigation, the killer's true identity continues to elude us. The streets of Whitechapel are now a testament to the city's resilience. Yet the Ripper's story continues to fascinate and horrify. The case serves as a stark reminder of the limits of our knowledge. The mystery of Jack the Ripper forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that some questions may never be answered, and some monsters may forever haunt the shadows of our collective imagination.